To the book of Leviticus chapter 23. And this morning we're continuing on in a series of sermons on Leviticus. Last night, many of you who were at the dinner with friends witnessed another pastor from another church who was very skilled with being able to juggle. He's juggling this apple at the same time he's eating each of the apples, and then another time he had 3 bottles, I think it was, and was juggling these 3 bottles while balancing one on his head, and rather remarkable. So several people came to me and said, is all you got is Leviticus? Can you do anything besides Leviticus? And okay, I get the hint. But we have a few more chapters. We're going to be finished with this by April 22nd. That will be our last in this series of Leviticus. And regardless of what you think about it, I'm going to hate to see it go. It's been quite interesting, quite fascinating. The problem is this, as you well know, that when we enter into a chapter, there's an awful lot in the chapter, and it's just very difficult to try and whittle it down to where we can get some salient points and make some applications to our life today. Consequently, the sermons are getting longer and longer and longer. And this one was going to be a 12-page one, but down to 8. So you're in luck. We'll get out by noon anyway. All right. I'd like for us to read this chapter. It's a rather long chapter, but the reason that I want for us to read it is because it's a calendar. It's a calendar of events that God has given to His people. Again, we realize what we're seeing in the book of Leviticus is that God has delivered His people out of Egypt. They've been there for 400 years. And these are God's people now. And so He is taking this time in Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and these books to reveal Himself to His people and show them who He is, what He's like. And for us today, we're not living in a wilderness. We don't go and sacrifice at a temple. We don't have a priesthood in the sense of the Old Testament. But still, we can look at these rules and we can see these principles that God has given to His people and make application to them today. And one of those things that we can do is to look at God's calendar. So I'd like for us to read this chapter, and you can follow along. It'll be up on the screen for you to follow along. And I may read it fairly quickly. But it will be, I think it's good for us to see the calendar of events that God has. Beginning in verse 23, verse 1, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, These are the appointed feasts of the Lord that you shall proclaim as holy convocations. They are my appointed feasts. 6 days shall work be done, but on the 7th day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work. It is a Sabbath to the Lord in all your dwelling places. These are the appointed feasts of the Lord, the holy convocations, which you shall proclaim at the time appointed for them. In the 1st month, on the 14th day of the month at twilight, is the Lord's Passover, and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread to the Lord. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 1st day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work, but you shall present a food offering to the Lord for 7 days, and on the 7th day is a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work." And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, When you come to the land that I give you and reap its harvest, you shall bring the sheaf of the firstfruits of your harvest to the priest, and he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord, so that you may be accepted. On the day after the Sabbath the priest shall wave it, and on the day when you wave the sheaf, you shall offer a male lamb, a year old, without blemish, as a burnt offering to the Lord, and the grain offering with it shall be 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, a food offering to the Lord with a pleasing aroma, and the drink offering shall be wine, 1/4 of a hin. And you shall eat neither bread nor grain, parched or fresh, until this same day, until you have brought the offering of your God. It is a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings." We won't go into much detail about these offerings because we've done that before earlier on in the book of Leviticus. Verse 15, you shall count 7 full weeks from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering. You shall count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. Then you shall present a grain offering of new grain to the Lord. You shall bring from your dwelling places 2 loaves of bread to be waved, made of 2/10 of an ephah. They shall be of fine flour, and they shall be baked with leaven as firstfruits to the Lord. And you shall present with the bread 7 lambs, a year old, without blemish, and 1 bull from the herd, and 2 rams. They shall be a burnt offering to the Lord with their grain offering and their drink offerings, a food offering with a pleasing aroma to the Lord. And you shall offer 1 male goat for a sin offering, and 2 male lambs, a year old, as a sacrifice of peace offerings. And the priest shall wave them with the bread of the firstfruits as a wave offering before the Lord with the 2 lambs. They shall be holy to the Lord for the priest. And you shall make proclamation on the same day. You shall hold a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work. It is a statute forever in all your dwelling places throughout your generations. And when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, nor shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. You shall leave for them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, you shall observe a day of solemn rest, a memorial proclaimed with the blast of trumpets, a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work, and you shall present a food offering to the Lord. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, now on the 10th day of this 7th month is the Day of Atonement. It shall be for you a time of holy convocation, and you shall afflict yourselves and present a food offering to the Lord, and you shall not do any work on that very day. For it is a day of atonement, to make atonement for you before the Lord your God. For whoever is not afflicted on that very day shall be cut off from his people. And whoever does any work on that very day, that person I will destroy from among his people. You shall not do any work. It is a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwelling places. It shall be to you a Sabbath of solemn rest, and you shall afflict yourselves on the 9th day of the month, beginning at evening. From the evening to evening shall you keep your Sabbath. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel, saying, on the 15th day of this 7th month, and for 7 days is the Feast of Booths to the Lord. On the 1st day shall be a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work. For 7 days you shall present food offerings to the Lord, and on the 8th day you shall hold a holy convocation and present a food offering to the Lord. It is a solemn assembly. You shall not do any ordinary work. These are the appointed feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim as times of holy convocation for presenting to the Lord food offerings, burnt offerings, grain offerings, sacrifices, and drink offerings, each on its proper day, besides the Lord's Sabbaths, and besides your gifts, and besides all your vow offerings, and besides all your free will offerings, which you give to the Lord. On the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the produce of the land, you shall celebrate the feast of the Lord 7 days. On the 1st day shall be a solemn rest, and on the 8th day shall be a solemn rest. And you shall take on the 1st day the fruit of splendid trees, branches of palm trees, and boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. You shall celebrate it as a feast to the Lord for 7 days in the year. It is a statute forever throughout your generations, and you shall celebrate it in the 7th month. You shall dwell in booths for 7 days. All native Israelites shall dwell in booths, that your generations may know that I made the people of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Thus Moses declared to the people of Israel the appointed feasts of the Lord. So there, you may have noticed some patterns. You may have noticed some words that are over in. You may have noticed some differences between no ordinary work and no work at all. Those are some nuances that are important to us when we look at the Sabbath. Now, here's the thing. Today is March. Okay. Some of you had to look at your watch to see what the date is. Now, how do you know it's March 18th? Because your watch said so, or the smartphone told you? How do you know it's March 18th today? The calendar says so. Which calendar tells you it's March 18th today? The Gregorian calendar, which is also known as the Christian calendar. But if you're a Chinese today, what day is it today for you Chinese? Just want to see how Chinese you are. As a matter of fact, Mao Zedong several years ago, and of course he's not the first one to do so, but he's the one who changed it over from the old Chinese calendar to using the Gregorian calendar, which I thought was rather amazing that he would make that, because he typically keeps things Chinese. But here's the thing. Date and time were not very important to many people. Did you know that it wasn't until the 1700s that the British actually it was 1572, not 1700s, 1572, that the calendar began to take, this Gregorian calendar began to take root, as it were. So it wasn't that long ago, actually, in the larger scheme of things. And today, we measure so much of our life by a calendar that during most of the time of this world was rather haphazard. Even in our world today, while those people who are from the West or in the West, we would typically use a Gregorian calendar. There's many places where people measure time and days in another way. Some measure time according to the harvests, whatever harvest it is. It may be a wheat harvest, or it may be the harvest of corn, maybe the harvest of fruits and vegetables. They measure time according to harvest. Some measure time according to stars, others according to seasons. Some seasons would be the cold season and the hot season. Or if you're in a place where there's 4 seasons, it would be cold and warm and not so cold and really hot, something like that. Other places don't go so much by the seasons as by whether it's wet or dry. The way time measure is measured is it dry season or is it wet season? And how do we respond to whatever the weather's doing for us? Now, there are several calendars. The Gregorian calendar is very recent as compared to, say, the Babylonian calendar. Thank you. The Islamic calendar is based on the motion of the moon, and the Jewish calendar is based on the motion of the moon, as is the Chinese calendar based on the motion of the moon. The reason I use these 3 is because although they go by the moon, they don't have the same calendar because they measure the new moon at different times. For the Islamic calendar, the first day of the month is when you see the first sliver of the moon. So it might change. In fact, it might change in such a way that you don't see it the first night, you don't see it to the second night, and that changes their calendar completely around. For the Chinese, they have a whole system of astrological system for determining. The Jewish calendar combines both the sun and the moon to form their calendar, and I was looking up on the internet, how do you determine the date in the Jewish calendar? And there's this enormous formula that you go through to determine the date, whatever the date would be in the Jewish calendar. Now, the spread of the Gregorian calendar is largely due to Great Britain. When its colonies adopted that, and September 3rd, they noticed that there was a problem there. September 3rd became September 14th, and so 11 days disappeared from history. They just kind of arbitrarily said these days are gone, and at that time. In fact, back when the first Julian calendar, it was so mixed up that it was so out of sync that in the year 46 BC, 3 extra months were added to the calendar, making it, instead of 365 days, 445 days. All I'm saying to you is you think it's March 18th today, but you don't know what day it really is, Because certain people can make an arbitrary decision. We'll cut off 11 days, we'll add a day here and there, and if you're using a different calendar, a Jewish calendar or a Chinese calendar, it's not March 18th. So we put a lot of stock in thinking that we know what time it is and what day it is, but in fact, somebody took a shot in the dark and said, let me tell you what the date is, okay? Let me tell you, when determining what a Chinese year looks like, one must remember several astronomical calculations. Listen to this. First, determine the dates of the new moons. Here, a new moon is completely black moon. That's when the moon is in conjunction with the sun. It's not the first visible crescent used in the Islamic and the Hebrew calendars. The date of a new moon is the first day of a new month, whenever the moon is completely blacked out. Secondly, then, you determine the dates when the sun's longitude is a multiple of 30 degrees. Okay? So, when the sun's longitude is 0, it's at the vernal equinox. At 90, it's at the summer solstice. At 180, it's at the autumn equinox. 270 at the winter solstice. You add another 90 degrees then to that. You come to 360. You've come to full circle back to 0. That's how the Chinese have figured their calendar. They actually have done this for well over 2,000 some years and have done it accurately, all those, accurately for them to tell us how their calendar works. And again, a whole raft of rules you need to know about how many days in this month, when you add a 13th month, and how do you know which month is going to be the 13th month, on and on and on it goes. Very interesting to me. So when we come to this discussion in Leviticus chapter 23, what we're seeing here is a calendar that God is giving to his people. God's calendar, thankfully, is really very simple. But it's one that we're totally out of touch with. Not totally, but almost. Here's what God says. His calendar is seed time and harvest, cold and heat. In Genesis 8:22 says this, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. God's calendar. God's unchanging calendar. I propose that we just go back to God's calendar and make life a whole lot easier. But then God did expand on this. The Israelites, you see, generally worked from sunrise to sundown. They counted then the months by phases of the moon. They measured their existence then by seed time and harvest. However, that harvest came up, and that's a lot that determines for them when these feasts are celebrated, and that's how they would measure the passing of time. But for us today, living in modernity or post-modernity, whichever one you choose, because you don't know if it's March 18th or not, so living today, the thing is, if I were to ask you, are we in the planting season or the harvest season? What would you say? Planting season, just because you think it's spring, but what are you planting? If you're planting winter corn, you're not planting it now. So, yes, typically we would say probably in the planting season, but you had to guess, didn't you? If we really want to know, we consult the Farmer's Almanac. Farmer's Almanac tells us when to plant, when to harvest. My grandfather on my dad's side was a farmer. My dad grew up on the farm. We used to go back and live on the farm. I just loved the rhythm of the farm, and it was always great for us to go back there. But for us today, the only way we know that it's harvest time is, how do you know it's harvest time? Thanksgiving. Football. Yeah, okay. See? For some of you, you get it. That's your calendar. For some of you, you don't get it because that's not where you're from. You would go by a different calendar. So we put a whole lot of stock in this calendar business that maybe we should think about it. Usually for us, we know when Monday is, right? What happens on Monday? Work. we got to go to work, or we got to get up and get everybody else off to work. Monday, and so our calendar really is Monday to Friday, except if you're in Hong Kong, then it's Monday to Saturday, and sometimes on Sunday. Hong Kong people are the hardest working people in the whole world. But for most of us, ours is a weekly cycle that we work through. Now, you'll notice then that our holidays that we celebrate, especially if you're from the West, you have a little bit more of a rhythm if you use a Chinese calendar. But how many of you use a Chinese calendar anyway? Okay, that answers my question. So most of us have a fairly random holidays. We don't really have a rhythm to them. Our holidays aren't based on life events. They're kind of political events. Some president's birthday or Labor Day or something like that. What are some famous holidays? Double 10 holiday. Most of our holidays that we celebrate are probably political in some way. Now, you'll notice, though, in chapter 23, when God begins to give his calendar to his people, he starts out with the Sabbath. It's first mentioned. That should trigger a little thought in us that maybe God thinks the Sabbath is pretty important. In fact, he gave Israel the Sabbath for rest and for refreshment. It's also a special sign between God and his covenant. Now, I don't want to go much into the Sabbath today. I really just let that slide. But next week, I really want to take a fairly close look at the Sabbath because there's no place in the Scriptures that tell us that the Sabbath has been rescinded. So, but I don't want to take a whole lot of time for that today. We're going to come back to that next week, all right? The sabbatical principle, though, permeates all the law about all the 5 books of the law: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Also the number 7. There's 7 festivals in the year. We'll look at them fairly quickly: Passover, unleavened bread, week, solemn rest, Day of Atonement, first day of booths, and the first day after the booths or tabernacle. Every 7th year is a sabbatical year. Every 7 sabbatical years is a super sabbatical year, or the year of Jubilee. The system of feasts and sabbatical years emphasizes in the minds of the Jewish people the importance of the Sabbath. And when you see that word Sabbath, you should equate that with the word rest. That's very important for us today. You know why? Because very few people take a day to rest. So that's why we're going to do that. Thank you. Next week, come back. So let's look at a brief description of these feasts today, because it'll help us to understand where the Jewish mindset is and what God is trying to get across to his people. When they're called feasts. There's the Feast of the Passover, the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of the Tabernacle, but in fact, it doesn't mean food. When we think of feast, we think of gluttony for the most part. But that's not what they're thinking, although there was food. In fact, in the Day of Atonement, there was absolutely no food, none. It was a time of fasting and a time of personal affliction. So look, first of all, with the Passover. The Passover first came to us as a story in Exodus chapter 12, and the story was that, and the event that brought it about is when the children of Israel are coming out of Egypt. God is delivering his people out of Egypt. Slaves, they're helpless to defend themselves. There's no way they're going to go up against the Egyptian army, but God, in a very miraculous, in an amazing way, actually caused the Egyptians to want the Israelites to leave. And if you read that whole story, you'll see how there was a series of plagues that happened. And the last one was called the Passover. And the specific instructions given were you're to take a particular lamb, not any kind of lamb, but a particular lamb, perfect, that had been set aside for the purpose. And that lamb then was to be slain. The blood was to be poured out, and the remains of the lamb was to be roasted on fire. Nothing was to be left. The blood then, the head of the household was to take a plant called a hyssop plant, to dip it in the blood and put it on the top of the doors and on the 2 side posts. And the very clear instructions that Moses gave was this, that when the angel of death passes over and sees the blood, the angel of death will pass over. But if there's no blood covering the home, then the firstborn in that home was going to be slain. So an innocent lamb was slain, and its blood by faith was applied to the door of the household. Now, this Passover lamb, this Passover experience, has a very clear connection to the new covenant, to the New Testament. Those people, when they were in the midst of the event, didn't understand. They realized that this was a part of their salvation, a part of their deliverance, a part of their release from Egypt. But they didn't know the connotation it's going to have for you and I today. So the firstborn Jews in Egypt, they didn't understand what was happening when comparing it with the picture of Jesus Christ in the New Testament. But I want to remind you of something here. These firstborn, they weren't saved from the death angel by admiring the lamb. They weren't saved from the death angel because they had this deep caring for the lamb or because they even loved the lamb. In order for them to find deliverance from the death angel, that lamb had to be slain, had to be killed, and the blood applied to the doorsteps. I'm simply saying to you, that's important for us today, because in that Jewish household, they weren't saved because of a special relationship with the lamb. They were only saved when that lamb was slain and the blood put on the doorpost. So it is today. We aren't saved because of the examples of Jesus Christ or because he is a good example. We're not saved because Jesus Christ is a good teacher. We're only saved because Jesus Christ is the substitute who gave his life in our place. It's important for us to get that because we can too easily get caught up in the religion of the thing and to think, well, yeah, I think Jesus is cool. I think he's a good teacher and maybe he's a great prophet. That's not going to save a person. The only way for a person to experience salvation is through the shed blood of Jesus Christ in our stead on the cross. And interestingly enough, Jesus' life was slain at the same hour the Passover lambs of the Jews were being slain at the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. I'm saying that if we miss that connection, then we miss the whole connection between this book of Leviticus and what it's teaching us in the New Testament. Going on to the unleavened bread. And the unleavened bread and Pentecost came very close together. For 7 days after Passover, Jews ate only unleavened bread with their meals. This is shown to us in Exodus chapter 12, verses 15 and following. They meticulously removed any kind of leaven from their whole house. And what we learn from this as New Covenant Christians, New Testament Christians, is that we're to put the leaven away from our own lives. Now, the Bible does not say leaven equals sin, sin equals leaven. In other words, sometimes we like to see that very clear connection. But when it talks about doing away with the leaven, there's a very clear picture that's being taken, that's been presented to us about how leaven is in fact sin. When you come to the New Testament, and I'm just going to read through these very quickly. In the New Testament, we're told to put away the leaven of malice and wickedness. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 8. We're told that we're to put away the leaven of hypocrisy.